a quiet cafe, a single biscuit, and a secret that killed. Welcome to Faded Echoes. I am your host, Ombra. Drop a comment and share. Where are you watching from tonight? I always love hearing where this mystery finds you. Here we go. It was raining, the kind of rain that looks lazy until you're in it. And then you realize each drop's got a mean streak. I was on my way back from a morning errand, a favor to Fritz involving a rare Portuguese olive oil, when I found a woman waiting under our stoop's awning. She had one of those faces you want to keep looking at, not because it's beautiful in the usual way, but because it's got a story itching to get out. Her hands were in white gloves, but the left one kept tightening like she was winding an invisible watch. "You're Mr. Goodwin?" she asked, in a voice that could have been silk if it didn't snag on every third word. "That's me," I said, stepping aside to unlock the front door. "And you are?" "I need to speak with Mr. Wolfe." She didn't offer a name, which, in my experience, meant she was either hiding it or waiting for a better moment to drop it like a poker chip. I let her follow me in, shaking off her umbrella in the hall before Fritz could see the mess. Inside, Wolfe was exactly where you'd expect him at 11:30 in the morning, in the plant rooms, surrounded by orchids like a Roman emperor with better taste in company. I told him he had a visitor. He grunted, which is Wolfe for "bring her in, send her away," and "why are you talking to me while I'm with my orchids?" depending on the tone. This one was "bring her in." We settled in the office, Wolfe lowering himself into his custom-built chair behind the desk, the woman perched at the edge of the red leather facing him. She sat straight, knees together, hands folded now in her lap. "My name is Celia Harrow," she said, "and I've come because of a whisper." That earned her a look from Wolfe. Brief, but enough to tell me he'd shifted her from interruption to possible intrigue. "Go on," Wolfe said. She explained. 2 nights ago, at a small private supper at the Glenbrook Hotel, she'd been served tea and a single biscuit. Nothing strange about that, except that, as she lifted it, a waiter she didn't recognize leaned in behind her and said so quietly she barely caught it, "He will betray you before the week is out." Then he was gone. No one else at the table noticed. "And who is he?" Wolfe asked. "I don't know," she said. "But yesterday morning, I found that the safe in my study had been opened. Nothing stolen, only one document moved." I was leaning against the doorframe, watching Wolfe's eyes narrow like a cat hearing a mouse behind the wall. "Describe the document," Wolfe said. "It's a private contract, of considerable sensitivity." She hesitated just enough for me to know there was more, probably enough to fill a couple of filing cabinets at West 35th Street Police Headquarters if she ever made the mistake of explaining it to them. "I want you to find out," she said finally, "who sent me that warning and what he meant." Wolfe closed his eyes, as though meditating on whether this was worth rearranging the day's schedule, which in Wolfe's world meant whether it was worth rearranging his schedule. "I presume," he said at last, "you have the biscuit." "I do," she replied, and from her handbag she produced a small waxed paper packet which she laid on the desk. I caught Wolfe's expression, still bland, but with a shade of interest, which meant I was going to get the job of poking into this mess while he sat here, deciding how much of it he'd bother to unravel. The biscuit lay there between us like an uninvited guest, and somewhere, under the sound of rain against the windows, I thought I heard the faintest echo of a whisper. Fritz brought in the tray as if it were a flag of truce. 2 bottles of beer, a glass for Wolfe, none for me, and a small saucer in case our guest wanted to pretend the biscuit was a social call and not what it was, an object that had already walked into our morning and put its feet up. Wolfe didn't touch the beer. He leaned back, eyes half-lidded, which is not drowsiness in his case, but a kind of private theater curtain before the feature begins. I opened the waxed paper and let the biscuit breathe. It was round, pale gold, with a serrated edge and a faint glaze that threw a shy wink at the light. If it had any secrets, it wasn't coughing them up without a lawyer. "Miss Harrow," Wolfe said, shaping her name as if it were a pastry he'd accepted on sufferance. "Start with the least dignified part. Why do you carry a stale biscuit in your handbag?" "It isn't stale," she said, a spark showing through the silk. "It's ours." "Ours?" I asked. "Harrow and daughter," she said, looking at me and then back to Wolfe. "We make biscuits, or rather, we make a certain kind of biscuit very well and the rest well enough to pay for the first kind. My mother founded the company. I run it." That pushed her a notch up the chart. A biscuit heiress with a warning whispered over tea at a hotel neither of them owned was at least color on the canvas. Wolfe flicked a glance at me that meant, "File the name, check the industry, and don't take a brochure on your first visit." "And the document in the safe," he said. "A licensing agreement," she said. "Not yet public. If it were, it would move markets. We're in talks to let a rival use one of our blends under a different brand, with strict conditions. If anyone found out before the board votes this Friday, the terms would sour and the price with them." "Your board is Friday of this week," I said, "and a nameless waiter told you he will betray you before the week is out." "Tight schedule." She nodded once. I assumed. "A joke." Then I noticed the safe. It wasn't forced. Someone had the combination or watched me use it. Wolfe lifted his head a quarter inch. "Watched? Who in your household?" "I live alone," she said. Her eyes held on Wolfe and didn't move, which is a thing people do when they think dignity is a good disguise for fear. But I entertained for business. I had 3 guests the afternoon before the supper, briefly, and none in my study, and I have staff. "Names," Wolfe said. She gave them. A chief of operations named Damon Voss. A legal advisor, Henrietta Prynne, outside counsel with inside habits. A culinary director, Matteo Lima, who guarded recipes like a jealous monk. And staff, her driver, her housekeeper who'd served her mother, and a temporary assistant on loan from a PR firm because the phones were savage this quarter, and press wants to watch you sign your own name. I noted them, printing as neat as I ever do when someone mentions a board date and the possibility of a quiet fortune going moldy. Wolfe wiggled a fingertip, not unlike a conductor reminding the oboes they still existed. "The supper at the Glenbrook Hotel, who hosted it?" "It was private," she said. "A friend who knew I was under pressure wanted me away from my office and my kitchen." "You work where you live," he said. He prefers anonymity. We were 6 at table. "And the waiter?" I asked the manager afterward. No such man on staff. The discreet answer he gave me was that perhaps I'd misheard with the dining room so lively. The dining room was not lively. It was Tuesday. A bell rang. The front door. Twice. Fritz's call bell answering the door's rude shout. Fritz doesn't let a bell ring twice unless the person outside is either a plumber or trouble. He floated in, less floating than usual, and announced in his best cathedral voice that Miss Harrow was expected by 2 gentlemen and a lady who had followed her here from the corner and insisted on paying their respects. Wolfe's lips smoothed. "Insisted," he repeated, and looked at me. I went. There is a temperature the hall keeps when strangers blow in from the wet. It's the degrees just above damp where umbrellas drip and tempers try not to. 3 figures were arranged like a little tableau of civic ambition. The first was tall, well-stitched, with a coat that served as a resume all by itself. His eyes said he was used to signing things that other people read and paid for. The second, a woman with a leather folio tucked like a blade under her arm, had hair that looked brushed at noon and at midnight, and the posture of someone who builds polite fences out of statutes. The third was a stockier fellow in a chef's jacket under his raincoat. The jacket's cuffs were rolled clean. No one who stains his cuffs would have worn it. "Archie Goodwin," I said, "to let them know the admission price. If you're selling raffle tickets, you're early." "Damon Voss?" the tall one said. He didn't extend a hand. He measured me. Chief of Operations at Harrow and Daughter. Henrietta Prynne, the woman said. Her tone had the light chime of a summons. Counsel. Matteo Lema, the stocky one said. His voice was warm, bread cooling too quickly. I cook what Harrow sells. Lovely, I said. We're a parlour short of a quorum. This way. They followed me into the office like a weather front. Miss Harrow stood at once and turned to them with her spine straight and her chin at the exact angle women learn from portraits. Wolfe didn't rise. He considered them as if they were varieties of fungus he hadn't yet categorized. Mr. Wolfe, Voss said, drawing the attention to himself like a curtain. We didn't mean to intrude. He meant to intrude. They all did. The brownstone felt it and made a note for later. Yet you have, Wolfe said, placid. Forgive me if I don't offer chairs. I should like to know how you knew Miss Harrow was here. Her driver, Prynne said before the others. He was concerned. Miss Harrow left the car a block away and instructed him to wait. We saw her from the corner when we happened to be passing. That's a coincidence large enough to rent out for a wedding, I said. We were leaving a breakfast with the Glenbrooks manager, Voss said, and watched Miss Harrow watching him. Damage control. What damage? I asked. The rumour, Prynne said, like a metronome. There's talk in trade circles that Harrow is entertaining licensing. If it becomes chatter, the board will be influenced. We prefer to be the first to know what others think they know. And a waiter who doesn't exist whispered in Miss Harrow's ear, I said. You should hire him. He gets to the point. Lema didn't smile. He was watching the biscuit on Wolfe's desk with a gaze that men usually reserve for a lover or a recipe card. Where did you get that? He asked Miss Harrow. It's ours, she said, and the two words sounded softer when she said them this time. It's one of ours, he said, not looking away. But not from our line. The glaze is wrong. It's light, too light. We add a ribbon of barley syrup to the wash. Wolfe made a sound under his breath that was almost approval. He crooked 2 fingers at me. I slid the saucer closer to him. He didn't touch. He never touches a clue until he has to. He sniffed delicately, as if the air above the biscuit were an essay he intended to annotate. Anise, he murmured. Not pronounced, and something resinous. Mastic? Lema nodded, surprised. A thread, to thin the sweetness. Not in your line, Wolfe said. No. Voss took a half step, then remembered where he was and took none. Miss Harrow, we came to advise you against engaging outside help. If there's a leak, we can address it internally. We need to control exposure. Prynne's eyes stayed politely dead. Mr. Wolfe, Miss Harrow's concerns involve confidential corporate matters. If you intend to involve yourself, we'll need to discuss scope and privilege. Wolfe inclined his head a fraction. If I intend to involve myself, he said, we'll discuss terms. Mr. Goodwin. That meant escort our weather front out to the porch and see which way the wind blew. I guided them to the hall. Voss used the time to lower his voice to Miss Harrow. Celia, be sensible. This is spectacle. We're steady until Friday if we keep our heads. Keep yours, she said, and the gloves tightened once on her lap. I'm keeping mine here. Prynne gave me a card. I put it in my pocket where it could learn manners. Lema paused at the door and said, to no one in particular. We don't use mastic in public. It clouds the finish. When they were gone and the house had exhaled, I went back in. Wolfe had his eyes on the biscuit again, as if it were reading him a bedtime story in a foreign language. Miss Harrow was doing the thing people do when they want not to plead with Wolfe. She was waiting him out. You brought your problem to my house, he said finally. It will not spread here. If I consent to act, my house remains inviolate, my time is rationed, and Mr. Goodwin will intrude where I will not. If you... Why? He flicked his fingers, rejecting his own rhetorical embroidery. My fee is hefty. I can afford it, she said. not reaching for the checkbook because people who can afford it never rush the performance. "Then you will pay a retainer," he said, "and you will leave the biscuit." She took out the checkbook. The nib of the pen rasped. The sound is the same if you're poor or rich. It's the ink that changes its tune. "Before you go," I said, "a few things I'll need by 3 o'clock. The names of the 6 at your table Tuesday, your driver's report for the last 2 days, a list of who has the safe combination, including ghosts, and a copy of the licensing draft. Redactions allowed, but don't black out the verbs." She looked at Wolfe for permission. He gave a small nod that said Archie's mouth was attached to his brain today and might be useful. "And Miss Harrow," Wolfe added, eyelids drifting, "tell your driver he is not to act as a public herald. No one should know where you go unless you want them to. Mr. Goodwin will visit the hotel. He will discover whether a waiter exists who does not exist." She rose. "The Glenbrook will stonewall," she said. "They do it with style." "I have style of my own," I told her. "I also have a friend who writes for a paper in a way of suggesting that discretion is cheaper than publicity." That got us the first real smile of the morning. It made her look like the story she'd been carrying finally exhaled. She left the biscuit and the retainer. Fritz saw her out with the kind of courtliness that makes intruders think the house had forgiven them. When the door clicked and the rain resumed its private correspondence with the city, Wolfe let his shoulders sink into the chair, a king resuming a throne he never left. "Well, Archie," a whisper over tea, a biscuit out of line, and 3 functionaries who found our steps. "We shall hope their coincidence is genuine. Otherwise, our threshold has been measured." "I'll take the Glenbrook," I said. "You want Saul on any of the home front?" "Soon," he said. "First, fetch a lens. There's a film on that glaze I don't recognize. If Mr. Lima withheld mastic from the public, perhaps someone else did not. And call Mr. Cohen. Ask without printing whether anyone's buying Harrow stock on a rumor that hasn't yet been born." I got the lens, and he bent over the biscuit with the concentration he saves for orchids and human folly. The glaze did show a faint smudge near the serrations, like a fingerprint that had second thoughts. Wolfe grunted, a low, contented note, as if the biscuit had finally spoken, not a confession, but at least a greeting. "Archie," he said, "you will also ask Fritz to lock this in the kitchen safe. If anyone is foolish enough to come for it, we shall learn it at once. Not your office safe. My office safe," he said evenly, "has already been opened this morning by words. Let the next attempt be for food." That was Wolfe when he was interested. He put a wall where the door had been and pretended he hadn't moved. I called Lon Cohen and got the usual dance. Yes, he'd sniff. No, he wouldn't print. Yes, he owed me. No, I didn't owe him anything except I did. I hung up with a promise to buy him lunch and not invite him. By the time I was shrugging into my coat again, Wolfe had the horn to his ear and was asking Saul Panzer if he had an afternoon free for a stroll that would not be a stroll. He covered the mouthpiece. "The hotel," he said to me. "Get the room where they dined, the waiter whose existence offends arithmetic, and the manager's account of Tuesday's liveliness. And if the Glenbrook keeps the stone wall polished, find a crack," he said. "The weather is on your side. The Glenbrook wears its carpets like medals, thick, patterned, and a little too proud of surviving the parade." I hit the lobby at 12:30, which is when the lunch crowd hasn't decided if it's a crowd yet, and let the smell of money and lemon polish do what it does for a place that insists on "good afternoon" as a greeting even when it's not. The hostess gave me the twice over that separates rumors from reservations. I gave her a smile that promised nothing and asked for the manager. The manager was a gentleman named Reuter, narrow at the shoulders and broad at the smile, the sort of man who has practiced the apology he will never quite say. He had a carnation in his lapel. I'd have bet a buck against a stack of olives. He could name the florist and the exact temperature that carnation liked to sit in while awaiting its moment. "Mr. Goodwin," he said, after I gave him my card and the condensed version that says, We're not the police, but we act like people call us before they call the police. The Glenbrook prizes confidentiality. Confidentiality is my middle name, I told him. It's also my dentist's favorite word. Let's walk. We took a slow loop through the dining room, tables set in a pattern that says, "We thought about this," and hushed enough for whispers to run laps. I stopped at a corner table laid for 6. Linen crisp, silver honest, a small floral arrangement that apologized for being alive. "Tuesday night," I said. He nodded. "Yes, a private booking. Miss Harrow and guests." "I want to see the staff log," I said. "Who worked this room, this table? Who delivered anything to this table? And I'm going to ask a question you'll hate. Does your hotel, on any day of the week, use temporary waiters brought in on call?" He did the smile. "We do not use people, Mr. Goodwin. We engage professionals. On occasion, on Tuesday." He looked toward the bar as if it held courage at the right price. "On Tuesday, we were short 2 floor staff due to illness. We called on a reputable agency to send one. Name." He said it. I knew it. Wolfe knew it. They provide bodies that carry trays and don't spill on the powerful. "And the one sent?" He opened his hands as if he'd been just about to give me that without being asked. "Was a last-minute substitution. The requested man was unavailable. The agency sent a replacement." "Name," I repeated. "Alexis," is what we were told. No last name in the immediate communication. The paperwork was delayed. "Tall, average, hair, eyes, accent?" Reiter looked offended by the implication that a man like him noticed eyes. "Average height," he said finally. "Dark hair, American, clean-shaven. He wore our vest and tie. He worked the corner of the room and then vanished at the end of service. We assumed he left to the staff exit." "You assumed," I said. "Do you have a security camera at the staff exit?" He took a breath. He was going to offer me something he didn't want to. "We do," he said, "but the footage from Tuesday night is missing." "Missing," I said. Not because I hadn't heard the word, but because sometimes saying it out loud makes the other person hear what they're saying. "How does footage go missing, Reiter? Did it elope with the pastry cart?" "Our vendor performs nightly off-site backups," he said, the words marching in formation. "On Wednesday morning, the footage for a 2-hour window was corrupted. Convenient window, which 2 hours? 8 to 10. Miss Harrow's supper was at 8:30, I said. He nodded. "How often do your 2-hour windows corrupt at the exact time a phantom waiter whispers into a guest's ear?" He gave me the injured pride routine. "Mr. Goodwin, we are not a cheap establishment. Cheap tricks don't happen here." "Only costly ones," I said. "I want a list of the staff on Tuesday, including kitchen. I want the names of the guests at that table, and I want to speak to whoever supervises this room at 8:30 p.m., Tuesday nights, in person, breathing the same air as me." He started to say a lawyer's name and changed his mind. "You may speak with our maitre d', Mr. Pell. He's on until 4. "Fetch," I said, and we took another slow lap while he sent a flunky sprinting. Mr. Pell arrived with the legato glide of a man who knows exactly how many steps it takes to cross a room without jostling a duke. He was in his 50s, eyes like shutters that only open for sunshine. I asked him about Tuesday. "Uneventful," he said. "Miss Harrow arrived at 8:23 with a gentleman I recognized. Mr. Voss. Others arrived within minutes. Service proceeded timely. No complaints." "Any staff you did not know?" "A young man from an agency. I instructed him to the corner tables. He was adequate." "Did you notice him lean to Miss Harrow and whisper something?" "If I notice every whisper at the Glenbrook," he said with light contempt, "I am no longer maître d'. I am furniture." "Let me try a different angle," I said. "Anything about him you'd recognize if you saw him again?" He considered. He was careful with his right hand. as if he had burned it. He lifted trays with the left mostly, and he did not smell of cigarettes, which is rare in men who have something to hide. Scar? Bandage? No, he said. But when he adjusted a tray, he flinched at the rim as if heat remembered him. That was better than height and hair. The kitchen could tell me if anyone in the trade had scolded a hand recently. I asked for the chef de salle and got instead the pastry chef, who had been loitering at the border of hearing distance the way pastry chefs do when a thing touches sweet. Her name was Yana. She had forearms like facts. "You're the one with the biscuits," she said, not waiting for an introduction. "I'm looking for the one with the whisper," I said. "Whisper you can't plate," she said. "Biscuit you can. Did you send biscuits to Miss Harrow's table Tuesday?" "We send to whoever orders," she said. Her table had tea and Petty's fours. Our Petty's fours do not look like Harrow's biscuits. We don't imitate. "Did a plate go out that wasn't yours?" She hesitated just long enough to count as an answer. "The agency boy asked for a separate plate to carry. He said the guest had her own. We refused. He waited at the pass and then picked up a saucer when one was set, not ours, but a generic. I was busy. Later, I wondered. "Show me your glaze station." She led me, back of house. Kitchens have their own weather. Steam rising off metal, voices pitched to cut through clatter. The glaze station was orderly, a tray of cooling pastries shining like the good kind of lie. Yana pointed to a small rack at the end of the pass. "The saucers for tea," she said. "He took one from there when the runner was turned." "So he came with his own biscuit," I said. "He needed a ride to the table." "And he handled it with his left," she said, remembering. I noticed because his right hovered. Men who are careful with one hand spill with the other. "Anyone see where he went after?" "Nowhere," she said. "He dissolved." I thanked them with enough charm to pass for gratitude and went back to the manager's office. He had the staff list printed. I slid it into my inner pocket. It would make good bedtime reading for Saul if sleep got dull. "Last thing," I said. "Who booked Miss Harrow's table?" "Mr. Voss," he said. "He called Monday. He requested a quiet corner." "Which you have," I said. "Tell me about your security vendor." "We can't disclose." "You can, because I'll learn it anyway, and I don't like making 2 trips for one answer." He told me. I recognized the name, one of those firms that guarantees the future will resemble the past if you pay them enough. I told him to save a copy of any corrupted files and to expect a call from a man named Panzer, who will ask for things in a voice that makes people remember where they left them. He promised cooperation in the tone of a man promising rain on command. Back in the street, the rain had decided to become honest. I pulled up my collar and phoned Saul. He listened, and I could hear the sound he makes when he smells work that isn't ordinary. "Agency name?" he said. I gave it to him. Their man was a last-minute Alexis. No last name. Average height, dark hair, American, careful right hand. Security footage gone from 8 to 10. Gone how? Corrupted. Vendor's name included. "I'll start with the agency," he said. "I'll ask if Alexis is Greek, French, or nobody. If the footage is gone, I'll want the server rack room. You think inside job?" "I think someone rehearsed a trick and chose a stage with good chairs," I said. "Also, the biscuit wasn't Harrow's line. Lima clocked mastic missing in public. Somebody knows the private recipe and did a variation." "Employees, ex-employees, contractors," Saul said. "Or a rival who bribed one." "Add a driver who broadcasts where his boss is," I said. "Miss Harrow's trio followed her to our door like the last act of Pirates. If it's a leak, it's a sprinkler system." "Copy," Saul said. "I'll ring you when I make the agency talk." I stopped under an awning and jotted a few items while the water tried to pick a fight with my hat. Item 1. The waiter is an insertion, not an accident. Item 2. Glove on the right hand, or a memory of heat that kept him wary. Item 3. Pastry confirmed a plate that did not originate from their kitchen. The biscuit had ridden in like contraband and left like a message. I swung by the agency to see if they would serve me a lie with a garnish. Their receptionist was the kind of cheerful you get out of a vending machine. Bright, cold, and exact change only. No Alexis on their Tuesday dispatch. What a shame. There must be a misunderstanding. We'll be happy to review our logs and get back to you when the moon turns to cheese. I asked for the manager, got a locked door with a blurred silhouette and a voice telling me about privacy policy. The agency was either complicit or rehearsed in being useless. Both can be educations. I left my card and a smile that promised I had cousins. By 2:30, I was back at the brownstone. Fritz accepted my coat as if it had offended the house. He does not approve of city water touching his floors. I went in to Wolfe. He was not with the orchids yet. The 3 to 6 up there is sacred, but he delays it for the company of an idea when the idea is well behaved. The biscuit sat on the saucer, now in a glass cloche like a specimen, which is what it was. "Report," he said. I gave him the walk-through. Agency man with no paper trail, the careful right hand, the pilfered saucer, the corrupted tape, Voss making the reservation and choosing quiet, like a man choosing the direction a rumor flows. Wolfe listened, chin tucked, fingers paddling air. When I got to Jana's note about the glaze station and the left-hand lift, he made the small please noise again. "Good," he said. "Corroboration. Mr. Lima's observation was not staged for us alone. The biscuit is an introduction, not a gift." "It's a calling card that talks," I said. "To say, I can get next to you and you'll never know until you bite." "Not quite," Wolfe said, lazily precise. "It says, I can use what you trust, your brand, your table, your appetite, and make it speak to you in my voice." That voice whispered, "Betrayal before the week is out," I said. "If they're punctual, we have 3 days." He stretched one finger toward the bell. Fritz appeared like an afterthought the house had and was proud of. Wolfe told him to put the biscuit back in the kitchen safe and to dust the glass cloche for prints before he did. Fritz nodded with the affronted dignity of a man asked to dust dessert, but he took it. "Saul?" Wolfe asked. "On the agency," I said. "They deny knowing an Alexis and refuse to show logs without a subpoena." "We shall warrant one by other means," Wolfe said. "Call Miss Harrow. Ask her for the list of her table, the friend who wanted her away from her office, his name, the temporary assistant from PR, the driver's full name and address, the housekeeper's tenure and whether her loyalty is to the family or to the house. I want the draft contract, as you asked, and a log of who entered her study the last week. Tell her to be explicit about nothing going missing, only moved. She'll ask why that matters." "Because," he said, and his eyes flicked to the empty saucer, "anyone can steal. Only someone with a claim will rearrange." The phone rang as if it had been cued. I took it. Lon Cohen's voice said hello like a headline. "Archie, you asked if anyone was sniffing Harrow stock. It's not a stampede, it's a pair of shoes. Small buys through 2 accounts I've seen before when someone wants to smell like a civilian. Started Wednesday morning. They're not buying the company. They're buying an angle." "Names," I said. "I'll hand them to you over soup," he said. "I'm not your blotter." "Be my Valentine," I said. 4 o'clock? "Make it 5, he said and hung up. "Investors," I told Wolfe. "The kind who arrive before the press does." "They always do," he said. "We must arrive before both." I dialed Miss Harrow. She picked up quick. Her voice had the crispness of someone who had been waiting not to think. I laid out the list, and she promised the names and papers by courier within the hour, with the precision of a woman who had staff and wasn't afraid to use them. I asked the friend's name. "Finch Avery," she said. "He runs a supper club and thinks he runs my calendar." "Does he run your driver?" "No," she said. My driver runs himself if I'm not stern. Be stern, I said, and tell him a man named Panzer may want his last 2 days. He is to be cooperative or unemployed. She breathed a thank you and ended the call. Wolfe closed his eyes and traveled somewhere up the slope of a thought. We will have our circle in a moment, he said. Mr. Voss, who chose the table and worships control. Ms. Prynne, whose instinct is to own any conversation with the threat of ownership. Mr. Lima, who knows which glaze belongs to which altar. Mr. Avery, who removes a woman from her work under the pretext of friendship. The driver, who narrates. The agency, which invented a man, and... He stopped because the doorbell sounded, one short pulse and one long. Fritz's signal for a delivery. Courier, I said. We waited while the house performed its minor rituals. The envelope was thick and brown and tied with a string that had opinions about knots. Inside were the names, the draft with bars of black like a piano practicing, and a note in Miss Harrow's hand. The document was placed back in the wrong orientation, slightly askew. No cash or jewels taken. Only that. Wolfe read it. His mouth arranged itself into approval the way a cat arranges itself into sleep. Askew, he said. Good. Someone who wanted it seen. Seen by her, I said. A message. Always, he said. Mr. Goodwin, go to Miss Prynne. Ask her to define privilege for me. Go to Mr. Voss and admire his sense of schedule until he shows you the one he isn't sharing. And stop by Mr. Avery's supper club. See if friendship makes reservations for whispers. And the agency? Saul, he said. He will peel that fruit without bruising the skin. I stood. The rain had not asked my permission to continue. Wolfe reached for the bell again and then didn't. Archie, he said, take care that your right hand does not brush any hot rims today. Because I might get burned? I said. Because, he said gently, someone wants us to notice his did. I started with Henrietta Prynne because lawyers are like fresh oysters. You deal with them early in the day before they get warm and start smelling like trouble you can't ignore. Her office was on the 14th floor of a glass-front building that looked as if it had been designed to reflect all responsibility away from itself. The receptionist had a smile built from dental work and restraint, and she made me wait just long enough to remind me this was a place where minutes were billed, not given. Prynne's office was the size of Wolfe's kitchen and had the same degree of ornamentation. Clean lines, nothing soft, a view of Midtown that said she didn't mind looking down on things. She was behind her desk, jacket still buttoned, hair in place like it had been lacquered there. No handshake, just a flick of the hand toward a chair that was too modern to be comfortable. Mr. Goodwin, she said, this isn't an appropriate time. Neither is betrayal, I said, but it keeps lousy hours. She didn't blink. If you're here on behalf of Miss Harrow, you should understand there are privileged matters I can't discuss. That's the word I came for, I said. Privilege. Your counsel. You guard the secrets, which means you're the one who knows exactly which piece of paper in her safe could ruin Friday if someone saw it. I know every piece of paper in that safe, she said, and I also know that safe is in her private study, which I've never entered uninvited. But you have been invited. Of course, she said, on business. Last time? 2 weeks ago, she said, voice level, for a board prep meeting. We reviewed terms, she signed a revised clause, and I left. And the combination? You know it? Her lips twitched, not a smile, but the rehearsal of one. Number Miss Harrow opens the safe when I'm present. I don't look. You'd be the first lawyer in history not to look. Flattery doesn't suit you, she said. And if you're implying... I'm implying nothing, I said. I'm collecting. You were at her table Tuesday night. Correct. And you saw nothing unusual. I saw a dinner designed to reassure her that the world was still friendly, she said. I didn't find the experiment convincing. Because her eyes didn't move, but her tone did. Because Damon Voss doesn't do anything that isn't to his advantage, and Finch Avery doesn't invite anyone anywhere without a purpose. As for Matteo Lema, he glared at the tea service like it had insulted his ancestors. I made a note to tell Wolfe she'd just handed us an opinion column without knowing it. And the waiter. She tilted her head a fraction. I noticed him lean toward her. I assumed he was giving her the dessert list. She looked startled. I assumed she doesn't like surprises. I stood. Privilege, I said, is only useful when you know which direction to point it. Thanks for the compass reading. Her eyes stayed on me until I was out the door, the way a cat watches a bird that's already flown. Damon Voss was next. His office at Harrow and Daughter HQ was less corporate than I'd expected. Dark wood, framed vintage ads for biscuits that looked like they belonged in a museum of edible nostalgia. He was behind a desk that could have doubled as a parade float, with a phone in one hand and a pen in the other. He waved me into a seat while wrapping up whatever conversation he was having. When he hung up, he leaned back and gave me the smile of a man who'd already decided how much he was going to tell me. "Miss Harrow's concerned," he said, like it was an observation from the Weather Bureau. "I'm concerned too, which is why I'd prefer this handled internally." "Sure," I said. "Internally is how safes get opened without marks, how rumors start buying stock, how strangers walk up with biscuits." He didn't react to the biscuit reference, which meant either he hadn't heard about it, or he was better than most at keeping his eyebrows from telling tales. "You made the reservation at the Glenbrook," I said. "Quiet corner." "She needed a break," he said. "She hasn't taken a day off in months. I thought a small supper might remind her the company doesn't run on her presence alone." "You choose the guest list?" "Not entirely," he said. "Finch suggested it. He said he had a new blend to sample, wanted her opinion." "Finch runs a supper club," I said. "Not a tea house." "Finch runs on influence," Voss said. "You know that, or you wouldn't be asking." "And the waiter?" He gave a slow shrug. "I didn't notice him. If someone spoke to her privately, I missed it. You don't usually miss things." "I don't usually look for sabotage in a bread basket," he said. "But if you're telling me that's what happened—" He let the sentence hang like he wanted me to finish it for him. "I'm telling you a man with no name, no record, and a careful right hand managed to get close enough to make her blink," I said. "If you didn't see it, maybe you weren't supposed to." That earned me a faint tightening at the corners of his eyes. "If you're implying I staged something, I'm implying nothing," I said. "Like I told Prin, I'm collecting." On the way out, I caught sight of a wall calendar half tucked behind a filing cabinet. Friday's board meeting was circled in red. Below it, in small handwriting, was another note. "Avery, dinner." I took that one with me. Finch Avery's supper club was in a converted brownstone that had decided it preferred being important to being beautiful. The hostess gave me a smile that had heard of warmth but never met it. Avery was in a back corner, talking to a couple in designer misery, but he spotted me before I reached him. His smile was quick, but his eyes measured. "Archie Goodwin," he said, standing just enough to look polite. "Celia's man." "I'm her man for as long as the job takes," I said, "which right now means I want to know why you arranged that Glenbrook supper." "She works too hard," he said. "She needed a table where no one asked for quarterly projections." "And you invited Voss, Prin, and Lema." "They're her circle," he said. "Trusted." "That's one word," I said. "And the waiter?" He blinked, not slow. "Waiter." "The one who leaned in and told her someone would betray her." He let out a breath through his nose. "I didn't hear it." "But you saw him." "I saw a waiter," he said. If he whispered, maybe it was to say the tea was hot. "His right hand," I said. "Burn mark?" "Didn't notice," Avery said. "But if you find him, ask him why he served her a biscuit. She doesn't eat them in public. She says it looks like advertising." That was the first new thing all afternoon. "She ate it?" She touched it, he said. Then the conversation moved. On the way back, I rang Saul. He was in the middle of telling someone no in a way that meant yes later. Agency cracked, he said. Alexis is short for Alexander Dent. No priors. Freelance catering for years. Last steady job was with a boutique patisserie in Queens. Left after an accidental scald 6 months ago. Agency says he came recommended by an unnamed client. Guess who? Voss? I said. Winner, Saul said. Also, Dent's bank account shows a deposit Wednesday morning, $5,000. No catering job pays that for one night unless you're serving diamonds. From where? Shell account. I'm chasing it. By the time I got back to the brownstone, Wolfe was with the orchids. Fritz let me in without a word, which in Fritz's vocabulary meant the day had reached the point where the food was more important than the people. I waited until Wolfe came down, took his chair, and told him everything. When I finished, he sat silent for a long moment, eyes closed, fingers steepled. Mr. Voss, he said finally, arrange the stage. Mr. Dent delivered the message. The biscuit is both token and proof. The safe was open to be seen open, the contract moved to be noticed, and all in the week before, a board meeting whose outcome may be influenced by apprehension. You think they want her spooked enough to back out? I think, Wolfe said, they want her position weakened enough that terms change in favor of someone else. Which means Friday's the clock, I said. Friday, Wolfe agreed. Until then, Mr. Goodwin, you will make yourself an irritant to Voss, Prynne, and Avery. Irritate Dent if you can find him. Someone will swat. I wish to see who. I started with irritation by phone because it travels faster than I do and doesn't get wet. Voss picked up on the second ring, which told me he either enjoys efficiency or thinks he can win a race if he hears the starter pistol early. I told him, in a voice that could have been neighborly if you didn't listen to it, that I'd be meeting a man named Alexander Dent later to chat about catering and coincidence. I added the bit about his $5,000 arriving Wednesday like a fruit basket. The only sound at his end was pen on paper. Some people write when they're thinking, others to pretend they are. You accuse me of bribery, he said, after letting a lawyerly pause do push-ups. I'm not accusing, I said. I'm telephoning. If I were accusing, there'd be more company on the line. I don't know a Dent, he said evenly. And if an agency sent an unvetted man to the Glenbrook, that's the agency's mistake, not mine. Sure, I said. And if he whispered at Miss Harrow, that's his voice, not yours. But if you think of anything you forgot to tell me, I'm as reachable as the truth. I let him sit with that and rang Prynne to thank her for her time and to mention, in passing, that the firm that doesn't disclose security vendors had already disclosed enough for Saul Panzer to be shopping for a screwdriver. She gave me a word about trespass statutes in a tone that suggested she could use them as a dessert spoon. I told her we'd be careful not to break any laws we couldn't fix and hung up on her inhale. Finch Avery got a friendly note asking whether he'd like to host another supper where no one would whisper unless it was to the maitre d'. He responded 5 minutes later with a text. Come by at 6. Private room? I have a story. Men who announce stories rarely own them. But I said I'd be there. The brownstone doesn't approve of days like that. Its woodwork tightens and the radiators hum in a register between warning and reproach. When I got in, Fritz met me with the kind of face he uses when the roast goes over by a whisper and the universe should apologize. Mr. Goodwin, he said low, the kitchen safe. Open? I asked, heading that way. Not open. Touched, he said, which in Fritz's rubric is worse. We went through the swing door. The kitchen is Fritz's sanctum. If the orchids upstairs are Wolfe's altar, the line of copper and steel down here is its shining twin. The small wall safe is set into a tile run behind the pantry door. Its paint was immaculate. Fritz sees to that. But even immaculate paint earns dust, and on the little brass wheel there was a crescent smear where someone's fingertip had thought it was invisible. I crouched and looked. The smear was faint, and over it, as if by apology, a dusting of flour had been brushed that didn't belong. Fritz doesn't flour the safe. Anyone else down here? I asked. No, he said. I was in the market for 20 minutes. When I returned, there was a sense. Fritz, being Swiss, only talks about a sense when reality hasn't signed the guest book yet. I turned the wheel to where it had been. The dial had a tiny roughness just past 40. The biscuit we'd placed there should have lain in its cloche like Snow White. I opened the safe. The cloche was there. The biscuit was there. It was, to the naked eye, the same. But men who live around Wolfe learn that naked eyes often miss their underclothes. I lifted the cloche with a dish towel to keep my seashells off it and leaned in. What? I asked the air. Did you change? Nothing, Fritz said, offended on behalf of his stainless universe. Not you, I said. Them. The serrations around the biscuit's edge make a pattern like a tiny crown. On the second scallop from the top, there was the faintest nick, not a bite, a tool mark, as though someone had tapped it with the corner of a knife. Light as a thought. I hadn't seen that before. Wolfe would have seen it if it had been there. Phone, I told Fritz, and he handed it to me like a surgeon's nurse. I got Wolfe out of the plant rooms. He came in with the air of a man interrupting his devotions to attend to a minor heresy. I told him. He bent, hands on knees, and looked as though half an ounce of gravity had increased. Pfui, he said, not with disgust, but with hunger. He pointed. There. I saw, I said. A love tap. Not love. A signal, he murmured. Fritz, the spice cabinet. The mastic Fritz moved like a man already sure of the answer. He slid the cabinet shelf out and took down a small jar. He had decanted the mastic tears into something prettier than they had ever been. Fritz rebels against ugly packaging. He held it to the light. The surface had been disturbed. The top layer of resin grains, leveled by Fritz's affection, now showed a shallow valley, as if a careful spoon had taken a pinch and then tried to put it back. I did not, Fritz said, the 4 syllables as upright as a drill team. No, Wolfe said. Someone did. Not much. Enough to flavor a glaze. He stood up and looked at the safe again. Archie, call Saul. Tell him Dent is either in the city, or someone wants us to think so. Then call Miss Harrow. Ask whether anything in her house has been moved that should not be. Today. I rang Saul. He was 3 steps ahead. Dent left his apartment this morning, he said. Neighbors say with a small bag. Landlord says he's paid through the month. I've got a plate on him. If he uses the L to Queens, I'll get a hymn. Why? Because someone breathed on our biscuit and sampled our mastic, I said. Not enough to brag. Enough to leave a smudge. That's either dumb or cocky, Saul said. I'll assume cocky. I'll widen to patisseries. If Dent went back to old haunts, he'll need an oven. Bring an appetite, I said. Miss Harrow answered on the second ring. I asked about movement. My study, she said, calm out of duty. A tea saucer appeared on my desk. Housekeeper says she didn't put it there. There is a faint ring, as if something sat on it. Nothing taken. The draft is where I left it, only straight. Straight? I said. I left it askew, she said. When I noticed the first time, I decided to leave it that way, to see if anything else changed. Today it is squared with the blotter. Good, I said. That means they were there to look again, not to take. Lock your windows. Tell your driver to stop playing town crier. And Miss Harrow, if fresh biscuits arrive at your door, don't eat them. I don't, she said. In public. In private, I do. Then don't in private either, I said. When I hung up, Wolfe had his lips in the shape he uses when giving the universe credit for wit. The trespasser likes the choreography of order, he said. First askew to show that he can touch. Now straighten to say he decides how the room looks. Here, he taps our biscuit to tell us he's not finished with it, and he tastes the mastic to say he knows where flavor begins. You want the house locked down? I asked. The house locks itself, Wolfe said. What I want is posture. Whoever intruded here will learn that we are amused, not alarmed. Which is Wolfe's way of telling a burglar he picked the wrong church to leave a calling card in. He rang for beer and did not drink it. That's how you know the case had slid from interesting to personal. Beer without lips is Wolfe without forgiveness. I left him to it and headed for Finch Avery's. The club's private room upstairs was all brass mirrors and low light, the kind of place where intrigue can comb its hair. Avery had one glass of something that matched the decor and a folder on the table like a cat lying on a warm newspaper. You said a story, I said, closing the door. I said it because it's my turn, he said. Celia trusts me because I knew her mother. I keep my capital by spending it sparingly. He tapped the folder. Inside is an old contract, 20 years. It's from when Harrow and daughter licensed a blend to a boutique patisserie run by a woman named Althea Dent. Dent, I said. He nodded. Alexander's mother. Alive? Dead. 3 years, he said. But the clauses, look at them. There's a non-compete on use of derivative, profiles in direct retail, but there's a curious carve-out for private catering demonstrations. That's the kind of language a clever lawyer leaves when a chef insists on breathing the recipe outside the kitchen. Henrietta Prynne wrote it? Pre-Prynne, he said. Different counsel. Same style of protecting a brand like a saint's finger bone. And you had this lying around because I collect favors, he said easily, and I never throw away paper that smells like tomorrow. I read enough to know Wolfe would purr. It linked Dent to Harrow in a way that made the $5,000 look less like sudden inspiration and more like old habit stroked the wrong way. I left the folder where it was. If Avery wanted to lend, he'd lend. He did. A copy, he said. Consider it an hors d'oeuvre. Back on the sidewalk, the rain had traded honesty for enthusiasm. I called Saul. He was in a voice that meant he was moving. Dent used to help his mother with private events, he said without greeting. Quiet rooms, rich people, he handled the plated sweets. He knows how to enter a kitchen sideways and leave without a sound. I caught a hit at a supply shop in Long Island City. Someone bought mastic tears and high-gloss syrup at noon, paid cash. The shopkeeper remembers a man careful with his right hand. Dent, I said. Or someone wearing him, Saul said. I'll keep on him. I told Wolfe the lot when I got back. He listened, eyes half shut. Fritz brought the beer again. Wolfe ignored it again. The kitchen safe was locked, the smear left as a souvenir under a strip of glassine for later prints. The house had resumed its equilibrium, which is to say it tolerated us until dinner. The pressure increases, Wolfe said mildly. They trespassed, tasted, tapped, straightened. They followed Miss Harrow to our door. They paid a man to be a whisper, and they have 3 days. What do you want me to be tomorrow? I asked. More irritating. Tomorrow, he said, you will be visible. Visit Mr. Voss at 9 with a copy of Dent's mother's contract and ask him what he forgot. Call on Ms. Prynne at 11 and ask whether carve-outs travel by heredity. And at noon, you will go to Harrow and Daughter's test kitchen with Mr. Lamer and invite him to reproduce the exact biscuit under our cloche, with and without mastic. Watch his right hand. And Dent? Saul, he said, if Dent has sense, he will run. If he has pride, he will perform. I suspect pride. By tonight, a second biscuit will find its way somewhere it should not be. When it does, have Fritz wrap it. I will not be robbed of my dessert twice. He closed his eyes then, not to sleep, but to put the last hour somewhere it could ferment. I stood at the window and watched the city make its bargains with the wet. Somewhere, a man with a careful right hand was testing how much he could say without moving his lips. Behind our kitchen, a spice jar had been stroked and a safe's dial kissed with flour. In a study across town, a document had learned posture and a saucer had left a ghost ring the color of intent. "Archie," Wolfe said, without opening his eyes, "tell Fritz to serve something tonight that does not require a glaze." "Because we're on a diet," I said. "Because," he said, "I'm tired of other men deciding how sweet my day should be." Morning at the brownstone is a routine you can set your watch by, if your watch can handle being wound by the sound of Fritz whisking eggs and Wolfe not moving. I was out the door at 8:30 with the Dent file tucked under my arm and a plan to make Damon Voss's coffee taste like regret. His secretary looked like she'd been told to stall me, but I leaned on charm until she caved, which took about as long as a matchbook joke. Voss was in his glass-walled office, looking over a printout the size of a small sail. I didn't wait for him to finish pretending he hadn't seen me. I walked in and put the copy of Althea Dent's contract right on top of his morning's ambitions. He didn't touch it. "What's this?" he said. "That," I said, "is from 20 years ago. Harrow and daughter licensing a blend to a boutique patisserie owned by Althea Dent. It's got a carve-out that says her son could cater privately and still sleep at night. That son is Alexander Dent, who got $5,000 last week before showing up at your Glenbrook supper to whisper sweet betrayal into Miss Harrow's ear. Any of that ring like the bell in a boxing ring?" His jaw didn't move, but his eyes did, a quick dart to the paper and back. "I've never met him." "You recommended him to the agency," I said. "I suggested a man who could carry a tray and not spill it." "Right," I said. "And he just happened to have a history with your company's founder and a non-compete that doesn't touch private gigs. That's a coincidence even Wolfe wouldn't swallow without beer." Voss leaned back. "If you're accusing me of collusion, produce proof. Otherwise, this conversation is over." I stood, pocketed the contract copy, and smiled like I was agreeing. Conversation's over. Investigation's not. By 11, I was sitting across from Henrietta Prynne again, the Dent contract copy now on her tidy glass desk. She read the carve-out twice, then set it down like it was a deposition she didn't want to have to sign. "Predates me," she said. "But you've seen it before," I said. "I've seen every licensing agreement in our archive," she admitted. "The carve-out is unusual, but not unique. Mrs. Harrow was sentimental about certain partners. Sentimental enough to keep a clause alive that could walk a recipe out of her kitchen and into someone else's." Her lips tightened. "The carve-out is legal. Exploiting it to damage the company would not be." "Meaning Dent could be sued if he's working for a competitor," I said. "Meaning," she said, "if he is, I would enjoy prosecuting it." I left her with the thought that I'd be in touch when she had a defendant. Wolfe would appreciate the phrasing. At noon, I was at Harrow and Daughter's test kitchen with Matteo Lema. He'd agreed to reproduce the biscuit, which meant I got to watch a man treat dough like it was a negotiation. The first batch, without mastic, looked right but smelled wrong. The second, with a whisper of mastic from Fritz's measured jar, was close enough that I had to lean in to tell the difference. Lema didn't need to. "This," he said, holding up the mastic version, "is the one Dent served. It is not ours." "How do you know?" "Because we use barley syrup in the glaze. Dent used a thinner sugar wash, and he bakes 2 minutes shorter. He's afraid of color. That comes from his mother. She preferred pale pastries." "Why?" I asked. "She thought they looked more delicate," Lema said, "and she liked to hide the strength in the flavor." I had him box up both biscuits, one of each, for Wolfe to examine. On the way out, Lema said, "If Dent is making these, he's not doing it alone. Someone is supplying the exact flour we use. Ours is milled in Brittany." You can't buy it here unless you have our importer. Back at the brownstone, Wolfe listened to my recap while rotating the mastic biscuit under the light like a jeweler. Fritz brought in the original from the kitchen safe for side-by-side comparison. Wolfe closed his eyes and inhaled each in turn. "The same hand," he said finally. "A baker's hand, not a saboteur's. Mr. Dent was not hired merely to whisper. He was hired to prove capability, to demonstrate access to ingredients, to technique, to touch." "An audition," I said. "A demonstration," Wolfe corrected. "For Miss Harrow, perhaps, or for someone else at that table." "Meaning the whisper might have been cover," I said. "The real message was the biscuit." "Just so," Wolfe said. The whisper ensured her attention. The biscuit displayed the threat. Whoever hired Dent wanted her to understand that the company's signature could be replicated, and therefore devalued, if she did not comply with an unstated demand. "Which we don't know yet," I said. "We will," Wolfe said, "by forcing the hand that stirs the mastic." The phone rang. Fritz brought it to me. Saul's voice was brisk. "Dent's in Queens. Rented a small kitchen space for a week. Cash. I've got eyes on him now. He's meeting someone at 4. "Who?" "Too far for a face, but the posture's wrong for a casual buyer. Could be Voss, could be Avery." I relayed it to Wolfe. He leaned back, the faintest crease at his brow. "Mr. Panzer will keep his distance but remain until the meeting ends. If Dent delivers anything, we will know what it is by tonight." By 3:30, the brownstone was quiet except for the sound of rain fingering the windows. Wolfe had closed his eyes, which in his case is like a cat sharpening claws. It means he's working. I was running over the suspect list in my head when the doorbell rang. Fritz's one short one long again. This time it was a messenger, dripping, with a small ribboned box. No card. The return address was a bakery I didn't recognize. Inside were 6 biscuits, identical to the mastic version, sitting in a nest of white paper. Wolfe didn't touch them. "Fritz," he said, "the powder kit." The top biscuit had a faint smudge at the edge, almost invisible. Under dusting powder it bloomed. A fingerprint, partial but clear. Wolfe allowed himself the smallest nod. "Archie, have Saul run this against his records. If it is Dent's, we confirm the sender. If it is not, we discover another hand in the kitchen." I packed the biscuit and called Saul. 10 minutes later, he was back. Not Dent's, female, mid-30s, in the system for a catering license infraction last year. Name's Marla Keene, works freelance for, wait for it, Finch Avery's Supper Club. Wolfe's eyes opened. "Ah," he said. Mr. Avery's story was incomplete. His invitation to Miss Harrow may have been bait for 2 hooks, Dent's whisper and Keene's delivery. One for fear, one for proof. "And both tied to him," I said. "Possibly," Wolfe said. "Or Avery is a conduit for another. Either way, Miss Harrow must be told her circle is smaller than she believes." I made the call. She was silent for a long moment after I gave her Keene's name. "She catered my mother's memorial," she said finally. "I had no idea she was still working with Finch." "Now you do," I said, "and you'll want to watch who handles your plates." When I hung up, Wolfe was already dictating a plan. Saul would keep on Dent. I would see Avery tonight, unannounced, with the boxed biscuits as a gift and the kind of questions that make men adjust their collar buttons. Wolfe would remain in the brownstone, letting the bait sit while he waited for the tug. "Archie," he said as I was shrugging into my coat, "observe Mr. Avery carefully. His hands, his eyes, his appetite. A man who plays host to betrayal rarely dines with a clean fork." Avery's club had 2 kinds of lighting, the kind that flatters a face and the kind that forgives a sin. He was at a corner table under the latter, a glass sweating on a coaster with his monogram, a little A that wanted to be larger. I set the ribboned box of biscuits in front of him like a centerpiece you only notice after the toast. "House gift," I said. "Pairs well with whispers." He glanced at the box, then at me, and decided not to reach. "Mr. Goodwin, you bring dessert to a man who owns a kitchen. That's either flattery or a search warrant." "Neither," I said. "It's a test of appetite." He lifted the lid with 2 fingers. The 6 mastic-breathed halos looked back at him. He didn't lean in. He watched me instead. "You're telling me something," he said. "I'm telling you Marla Keene left her fingerprint on one of these when they were delivered to our house. You're Marla Keene." His eyes finally went to the pastries, not with hunger, but with the professional interest of a host trying to see how the trick was done. "Marla freelances," he said. "She prefers my rooms to other people's dramas." "She prefers $5,000 to whatever your rooms pay," I said. "Tell me about her job Tuesday." "I don't employ the Glenbrook," he said, "and I don't place their staff." "Then who recommended her for a side service that used your sauces and my client's recipe?" He took a breath that probably cost him $1 in posture. "You have a point to skewer me with, Goodwin. Be brave." "You arranged a table," I said, "that brought Celia Harrow away from her study. You brought in people she trusts, Voss, Prynne, Lima. A waiter appears, Dent, who knows Harrow, biscuits like family because they were. A plate appears, Marla's, carrying a biscuit that isn't theirs but tastes close enough to make a boardroom flinch. A whisper says betrayal is coming. The message isn't the whisper. It's that someone can counterfeit flavor at scale." Avery's mouth bent, not into a smile. "Counterfeit is a crime," he said softly. "Replication is business." "Replication," I said, "is for gramophones. This is theft with better manners." He didn't deny it. He picked up 1 biscuit, turned it once, set it down. His hands were steady. "You could accuse me of having introduced parties," he said. "You could not accuse me of instructing anyone to scare Celia. I respect her too much." "You respect leverage," I said. "And you like being the room where leverage changes hands." He raised his glass. "Accurate. Tell me who wants to change the hands on Friday," I said. "If it isn't you, it's someone you dine with." "Dinner companions are not confessions," he said. "And if you're asking me to name a man you can arrest after Wolfe reads him a lecture, you'll leave disappointed." I stood. "I don't need a name from your mouth," I said. "I'll take one from your pantry." The pantry, it turned out, had more charm than I expected. A hallway lined with wine and a door with a discreet brass knob. Avery came with me. He liked the theater. In the small prep space, a woman in her 30s was sliding a tray into a low oven. Her right hand moved clean. No burn, no flinch. She looked up and her eyes went from neutral to irritated in a fraction. "Mr. Avery," she said, "you told me I had this room until 7. "You do," he said smoothly. "This is Mr. Goodwin. He's here to admire the mise en place." She said. "People usually warn me before they admire." "Marla Keene," I said. "You sent a gift to West 35th Street this afternoon. You forgot your glove." "I don't wear gloves," she said. "Not with glaze." "Then you left the print naked," I said. "Kind of you." She flicked a glance at Avery, and there it was. The little relay you only see when people share a lane. He didn't nod. He didn't need to. "I took an order," she said. "Paid in cash, picked up an hour ago. No card. Whoever you are, talk to my bookkeeper. You'll find nothing but flour and boredom." "Where do you get your flour?" I asked. She almost smiled. The ground. "Better jokes are extra," I said. "Origin." "Brittany when I can get it," she said. "I have a friend at a wholesaler who slips me sacks when a shipment overruns." "Wholesaler name," I said. "Confidential," she said. "My friend likes his job." Let me make it easier, I said. Did Damon Voss introduce you to this friend, or did you invent him on your own? She gave me the straight look people use when they're about to lie well. I've never met Mr. Voss. Your fingerprint met our biscuit, I said, and your employer met Voss often enough to write his initials on a reservation book. Stop pretending you operate in a vacuum. Kitchens have vents. Avery held up a hand. Enough, Archie. You're not a policeman. No, I said. I'm worse. I'm the remark before the headline. I looked around the small room. On the shelf above the mixer was a sack of flour with a green stripe band and a code printed in black, BF27FR. I'd seen the importer's label at Lamer's. It matched. I took my notebook out to write it down. Marla moved to block my view, which told me everything I needed to know and made me smile so she'd know I knew. Tell your friend at the wholesaler the code BF27FR has a big mouth, I said, and tell him if he wants to stop talking, he can talk to me first. Get out of my kitchen, she said, finally finding the register that meant it. Gladly, I said. Avery followed me back to the table. He didn't touch the biscuits. You think you found a line between my rooms and your client's kitchen, he said quietly. You found a rumor, not a wire. If you pull it, it may be attached to nothing. Funnily enough, I said, Wolfe likes pulling. He has strong fingers. I left him there under the forgiving light, a host rehearsing his defense. Outside, I checked the mirror in a parked car window. The same grey sedan that had taken an interest in me yesterday idled across the street. A man inside pretended to read a paper. He turned his head a fraction too slow when a bus hissed by. I strolled to a bodega, bought a pack of gum I didn't want, came back out, and crossed at a lazy angle. The sedan's driver adjusted his hat brim as if it had moved an inch, which it hadn't. I took his plate and phoned Saul. Friendly. Tail on me, I said. Plate is New York. 4 letters, 3 numbers. The last 2 are a 7 and a 9. Saul grunted. I'll ask a friend in motor vehicles to sing. Dent met a man at 4, he added. Not Voss, not Avery. Security tech from the vendor that lost the Glenbrook footage. Name's Jerris. They talked 15 minutes. 2 envelopes, changed hands. 2? Dent passed 1. Jerris passed 1, Saul said. I have a picture from across the street. Jerris left first. Dent bought a coffee and looked at his right hand like it had said something rude. Jerris, I said. That puts a plug in the corrupted footage drain and writes Voss's initials in the condensation. Maybe, Saul said, or it writes someone else's. Techs will do tricks for anyone who pays them in untraceable sugar. Stay with Dent, I said. If he bakes tonight, I want to know how hot. On the walk back to the brownstone, I kept the sedan in my peripheral. It turned off 2 blocks before home. That told me it was the kind of surveillance that wants to be seen just enough to make you arrange your smile differently. I gave Fritz the time and plate anyway. He likes to know which cars offended our neighborhood. Wolfe was in his chair, the 2 biscuit boxes on his desk like exhibits in a courtroom where the judge wore a yellow silk robe. I reported. He didn't move until I said Jerris, and then one eyelid lifted. Good, he said. Our phantom now has an electrician. And our hostess has a pipeline, I said. Keen's flour bears Harrow's importer code. Wolfe's nose twitched. A leak in logistics, he said. Not from the test kitchen, from the warehouse, or from the importer's domestic branch. Mr. Voss's purview includes procurement. Prynne will say it doesn't, I said. She will, Wolfe agreed. And she will be right in the strictest sense. But Mr. Voss knows every door and who holds the keys. He may not have opened this one. He may have told another where the hinges squeak. Fritz brought beer. Wolfe ignored it, then remembered his manners and drank half a glass in a motion that told me his mind had moved from orchids to bait. We will not wait for Friday, he said. We will have our gathering tomorrow night. You're calling the circle, I said. Yes, Wolfe said. Miss Harrow, Mr. Voss, Ms. Prynne, Mr. Lima, Mr. Avery, Mr. Dent, Ms. Keene, and Mr. Gerras will be invited. The room will be arranged to encourage candor. I will ask questions, and I will receive answers." He inhaled, not deeply. "And we will salt the field." "With what?" I asked. "2 falsehoods," he said. "First, that we have matched the importer's code on Keene's sack to a manifest initialed by Voss. Second, that Gerras has confessed to selling a 2-hour gap only once, on Tuesday, and that he was paid from an account linked to Avery's club." I raised a brow. "They'll deny." "Of course," he said. "But the denials will not align, and each man will look involuntarily at the person he fears most in that moment. You will watch." "And the truth?" I asked. "Close enough to sing harmony," he said. Voss had access and motive. Avery had rooms and motive. Keene had hands and motive. Dent had skill and the need to be seen. Prynne had law and a reason to warn or to wound. Mr. Lima, he paused, had pride and the ability to tell me, in a kitchen, the exact difference a thread of resin makes in a glaze. If he is innocent, he will help me disassemble the pretense. If he is not, he will isolate himself. The doorbell went. This time, Fritz's feet had the tempo of annoyance. He came back with a flat envelope, damp at the edges, addressed in block print to me. Inside, a single photographic print, a close-up of a biscuit on a saucer, the glaze catching light, the serrations clear. On the back, in a hand that tried to be tidy, 6 words. "You're looking at the wrong bite." Wolfe considered the photo without touching it. His mouth made a shape I like better than most. It's the one he gets when the game has moved a piece he hadn't expected, and he likes it. "Good," he said. "He is proud." "Dent?" I said. "Perhaps," Wolfe said. "Or the man who hired him and wants to use him as a mirror. Either way, the boast tells me tomorrow will be lively." He tapped the print with a pencil. "The wrong bite. Not the glaze, then. Not the mastic. The serrations. The flour. The edge. The tool mark," I said. "On our biscuit in the safe. A tiny nick." "Yes," Wolfe said softly. "A craftsman's signature. Mr. Goodwin, tonight you will go to the importer's domestic branch and ask their manager whether anyone has been ordering sample cutters for decorative pastry edges. You will use Mr. Lima's name to lubricate, and you will leave with a list. Then you will dine somewhere inexpensive to remind yourself what food tastes like when no one is pretending." He closed his eyes again. The house settled around him, adjusting its weight. Rain ticked the glass like a metronome marking the time we had left. "Archie," he added, without opening them, "ask Saul to persuade Mr. Dent that his best audience tomorrow is here. If pride rules him, he will come. If fear does, we will make a place for that too. And the sedan that wants to be noticed?" "Fred," he said. "Call Mr. Durkin. Tell him to follow your follower and to sit on whoever's lap he finds at the end if the lap is ungentlemanly." I made the calls. Fred grunted something cheerful about sitting. Saul said he'd play to pride, and the importer's night manager told me he'd be at his desk until 9 and that sample cutters was seasonal, which means constant. I put on my coat. Wolfe lifted his glass and finally looked as if the beer was something he chose, not a prop in a room he'd outthought. "Tomorrow," he said, and the word had weight. "We eat." The importer's domestic branch sat in a brick warehouse that had been new about the time Wolfe learned to dislike stairs. Inside, the air was part flour, part paper dust, and part the faint hum of refrigerated storage somewhere beyond the wall. The night manager, a wiry man named Kellis, had the kind of handshake that says he doesn't waste sugar on strangers. I told him I was asking on behalf of a chef we both knew, Matteo Lemma, and watched the skepticism slide off him like icing under heat. "Sample cutters," he repeated, leaning on the counter. "Yeah, we stock them. Mostly seasonal, but we keep the popular patterns all year." "And the Crown Edge serration?" I asked. "Like the Harrow biscuits?" He nodded. "We had a batch in last month. Special order, but not from Harrow's account." "Who then?" He glanced toward a clipboard and flipped a couple of pages with a pencil. "Order came through a wholesaler. Accounts under a catering supply in Queens. Jade Table. They pick up for a bunch of freelancers." "Marla Keene?" I said. He didn't blink, but his pencil paused. "I know the name. She's been here with them before, but this order wasn't her. It was a guy. Said he was prepping for a wedding." "Name?" "Dent," Kellis said. "Alexander Dent. Paid cash. Took 3 cutters. 1 crown, 1 fluted, 1 plain. Didn't seem like a wedding to me, but I'm not in the guessing business." I was, and I didn't need a crystal ball to see that Dent had signed his work with steel teeth. I thanked Kellis, promised Lima would hear about his efficiency, and left with the code from the invoice written in my notebook. The sedan that had been tailing me the day before wasn't outside. Either Durkin had made himself comfortable in the driver's lap, or the lap had moved to new pastures. I got back to the brownstone just before 9. Wolfe was in the office, the photograph of the biscuit still on his desk like a smug guest. I gave him Dent's trip to the importer and the cutter order. He closed his eyes halfway, which is Wolfe for applause. "So," he said, "the nick on our biscuit was not incidental. It was deliberate, to declare authorship. He wants it known that he can match their form as well as their flavor. That is, vainglorious." "It's also stupid," I said. "Now we can tie him to the cutter and the importer." "Stupidity is often an adornment of pride," Wolfe said. "Did the sedan trouble you?" "Not tonight. Either Fred scared it off or it has a different date." He rang for beer, drank half a glass, and pushed the rest away. "Tomorrow will be an exercise in controlled combustion. The trick will be to let them heat without boiling over before I'm finished." "Dent?" I asked. "Saul reports he is curious," Wolfe said. "Curiosity is the cord between pride and folly. He will come." That night, the brownstone settled into a taut quiet, like a room waiting for a verdict. Even the radiators seemed to breathe slower. I went over the seating chart Wolfe had sketched. Miss Harrow center left. Wolfe anchored at the desk, the rest fanned in a semicircle that would let him see eyes move and hands tighten. I'd be on my usual perch by the globe, close enough to catch a twitch, but far enough not to be accused of prompting one. Morning came gray and heavy, the kind of sky that makes New York lean on its horns. The invitations had gone out overnight by messenger, polite but without wiggle room. Fritz made breakfast like a man fortifying a garrison. By noon, Saul called to confirm Dent had acknowledged his and that he'd shaved for the occasion. Durkin reported that the sedan belonged to a private security subcontractor, hired this week by an unnamed corporate client. Wolfe's mouth flattened at that. "They will expect to retrieve something," he said. "We will ensure they do not." The first to arrive, precisely at 7, was Miss Harrow. She wore navy, and the expression of someone who had decided nerves were an indulgence. Voss came next, with a nod that tried to pass for casual. Prynne followed, lips pressed so tight you could have used them as a seal on a jar. Avery strolled in at 7:12, coat unbuttoned, the air of a man who liked watching the last guests fill the room. Lima came in with the faint scent of cinnamon and the eyes of someone who had left something on the stove. Marla Keene arrived last among the civilians, wearing black and no jewelry, her hands folded as if to keep them clean. Dent came 2 minutes later, looking like a man who knew every face in the room and had already assigned each one a chapter in his memoir. And then Jarras, thin, with a tech's unbothered posture and a gaze that kept sweeping the corners of the room as if he could see the wiring. I shut the door and took my post. Wolfe let the silence sit until it had weight. "Thank you all for accepting my invitation," he said, voice mild. "We are here because someone saw fit to disturb the integrity of my client's affairs, and, more offensively, my own. This will be rectified. Eyes moved, mostly toward Miss Harrow, but a few darted to each other. Wolfe continued. In the past week, a biscuit has been baked to mimic Harrow and daughter's signature. It was delivered to Miss Harrow under the guise of service at a private supper. A whisper was spoken, "He will betray you before the week is out." In the days following, there were trespasses. Her safe was opened. My kitchen was entered. The biscuit was tampered with, and mastic from my spice cabinet was tasted without leave. Dent's chin lifted at that, the flicker of ownership. Wolfe saw it, of course. We have traced the flour in that biscuit to Harrow's importer. We have matched the decorative cutter mark on its edge to an item purchased for cash by Mr. Dent at the importer's domestic branch. We have traced the delivery to my house to Ms. Keene, whose fingerprint adorned one of the biscuits. The flour in her kitchen bore the importer's code. Keene's fingers tightened once, then stilled. Wolfe shifted his gaze. Mr. Garras, your company provides security systems and backups for the Glenbrook Hotel. The footage for the evening in question was corrupted for a 2-hour window. You were paid in cash by Mr. Dent during a meeting observed yesterday. Garras started to speak, but Wolfe lifted a hand. Spare me the denial. The exchange was photographed. Whether you were paid to lose the footage or for some other mischief is irrelevant for this moment. Now the air was beginning to change. People leaning forward slightly, breathing through their mouths. Wolfe let it run a beat before adding, I will also note that the flour code on Ms. Keene's sack matched a shipment managed by Mr. Voss's procurement office. Voss's eyes flashed, but he stayed still. Wolfe continued, voice smooth. We could proceed by questioning each of you in turn, but I have found that candor flourishes when it has company. Therefore, I will state what I believe happened, and you may choose to confirm or to squirm. He laid it out without haste. Voss, concerned about the licensing vote, saw an advantage in unnerving Miss Harrow. Avery provided the stage and guests. Dent, with his inherited knowledge of the recipe and skill, was hired to craft the counterfeit biscuit as a warning of what could be done if the blend escaped their control. Keene, through Avery's channels, supplied the delivery. Garras ensured no one could later identify Dent at the Glenbrook. The whisper was theatre. The biscuit was the threat. You wished Miss Harrow to see that her recipe could be replicated, thus diminishing its value, unless she altered her position before the board meeting. Whether your aim was to prevent the licensing entirely or to adjust its terms, the method was the same. Demonstrate vulnerability, hint at betrayal, and let fear do the rest. Dent leaned forward. And what if I say I baked it for art, not for leverage? Wolfe's eyes opened a fraction more. Then I would say you were paid far too much for art. Pride may have been your motive. Someone else's profit was the aim. Voss cleared his throat. This is absurd. There's no proof Proof? Wolfe cut in softly. The cutter purchase is proof. The flour code is proof. The meeting with Garras is proof. What you seek is plausible deniability, Mr. Voss, and you will not find it here. Miss Harrow, if you wish to pursue civil or criminal remedy, the avenues are open. My function was to reveal the source of the whisper and the hand that shaped the biscuit. Silence, except for the small sound of Avery shifting in his chair. His eyes were on Voss now, not in surprise, but in quiet calculation. Prynne's lips had relaxed into the faintest smirk, as if a legal battle would be a pleasant change of pace. Wolfe leaned back. Now, I suggest you all consider the implications of further action. Mr. Goodwin will see you out. They filed past me, Dent last, with a look that mixed defiance and something I hadn't seen on him before. Relief. Outside, the rain had started again, soft and steady, like the city was washing its hands of the whole affair. When the door closed, Wolfe exhaled through his nose. Miss Harrow will decide how public this becomes, he said. Voss will survive, but diminished. Avery will adjust his guest lists. Dent will keep his cutters and his pride, though both are marked. And we— He reached for his beer at last, took a long swallow, and set it down. We will have dinner. Fritz appeared with the tray. The kitchen safe was locked. The spice jar was untouched, and for the first time in a week, the only biscuits in the house were meant to be eaten. Dinner that night had the quiet satisfaction of a case ending in Wolfe's preferred style. No one shot, nothing on fire, and the truth standing in the center of the room like it owned the place. Fritz had laid out roast duck with an orange glaze, and Wolfe ate with the deliberate pace of a man who believed the world could wait until he'd finished chewing. I wasn't fooled. His mind was still on the evening's gathering. The way his eyes lingered on nothing told me he was replaying it in pieces, measuring the pauses and glances as if they were weights on a scale. When the plates were cleared, I went back to the office with him. The room smelled faintly of citrus and rain, and the photograph of the biscuit still sat on his desk, as though the case wasn't quite ready to be filed away. Wolfe settled in his chair, steepled his fingers, and gave me that look that meant he was ready to put his thoughts into words. "They will not all sleep soundly tonight," he said. "Voss has already begun calculations to determine which allies remain. Avery will decide whether retaining Ms. Keene is worth the liability. Prynne will imagine her role as counsel expanding now that her client has seen the cost of keeping secrets. Mr. Lima will question every hand that touches his kitchen. And Dent— He allowed himself the faintest smile. Dent will tell himself he won. I leaned against the globe. "You think he didn't?" "He preserved his pride," Wolfe said, "and kept his tools. But he has shown his signature, and that makes him vulnerable. Men who work in the shadows should not paint their names on the wall." "Miss Harrow?" I asked. "She will not take it to the boardroom tomorrow," Wolfe said. "She will let the vote proceed, but with her eyes on those who sat at that table, and she will use what she has learned to shape the terms of any future agreement." "Meaning Voss's days are numbered," I said. "Meaning," Wolfe replied, "he will either become more useful to her than he has been, or he will be replaced. She has no interest in keeping a man who mistakes his position for permanence." I poured myself a drink. "You didn't press for confessions tonight. You could have gone harder." "I could have," he said, "and risked driving them into alliance against her. Better to fracture them, let them turn on one another in the days to come. The truth will spread through their circle as rumor does. Distorted perhaps, but with the correct names attached." "Dent won't be able to resist bragging," I said. "Which is why," Wolfe murmured, "he will be heard by someone who reports to Miss Harrow." The phone rang then, and Fritz answered in the hall before bringing it in. "Miss Harrow," he said, placing the receiver on Wolfe's desk. Her voice was steady, but there was a thread of energy under it. "I wanted to thank you both," she said, "and to tell you the vote passed, unanimous. Voss looked like he'd swallowed something sharp. Prynne was almost cheerful." "Your terms?" Wolfe asked. "Unchanged," she said. "And I've scheduled a procurement audit for next week." Quietly. "That will be illuminating," Wolfe said. She hesitated. "One more thing. A courier came to my building this evening after the meeting. He left a small parcel. No return address. Inside was a single biscuit, unglazed. No note." "Untouched?" Wolfe asked. "Yes," she said. "It's in my refrigerator." "Do not eat it," Wolfe instructed. "Place it in a sealed container. Archie will collect it in the morning." When she'd hung up, Wolfe looked at me. "An unglazed biscuit is a message. The absence of glaze removes the flavor's finish. It says the work is incomplete. He is telling her he can do more." "Dent again," I said. "Almost certainly," Wolfe said. "Though it could be someone imitating him." "We will examine it." I leaned back. "So it's not over." "Few things ever are," Wolfe replied. "This is merely the point at which the overt mischief ceases." The next morning, I took the elevator up to Miss Harrow's penthouse with a case under my arm that Fritz had packed with enough glassware to make any lab tech happy. She met me at the door in a slate suit and handed over the biscuit in a plain plastic container. It was pale, almost white, the serrations crisp. I could see, even without a lens, that the same crown cutter had been used. No nick this time, no signature. That alone was a signature. Whoever sent it, she said, wanted me to notice the difference. I told her Wolfe would have more to say and headed back. By the time I walked into the office, he'd been at the Orchids and was in a mood that meant I'd be doing the preliminary work. We set the biscuit under the magnifier, and I went over it inch by inch. The flour grain was slightly different, finer than the Brittany Mills product, almost silky. The smell was faintly floral, but not from mastic. "Chamomile," Wolfe said after one whiff. "Subtle, a variation, not a replica." "So either Dent's experimenting," I said, "or someone else is telling her they can play with the formula too." "Indeed," Wolfe said. "Chamomile could soften the profile, make it seem less assertive. If this was Dent, he's broadening his claim. If it was not, it is someone attempting to outdo him. Which one's worse for her?" "Both," Wolfe said, "but the second introduces a new actor." I sat down. "You think there is a new actor?" "I think," Wolfe said slowly, "that sending an unglazed biscuit is a different style of taunt. Dent is prideful, but he enjoys a flourish. His cutter nick, the glaze. Removing the glaze altogether suggests a different sensibility, perhaps more businesslike." "Meaning Voss?" I asked. "Possible," Wolfe said, "or someone aligned with him, seeking to keep the pressure on after last night." I called Saul and gave him the chamomile detail. "I'll start with suppliers," he said. "Not many bakers buy it in volume." The day passed without visitors. Wolfe spent part of it in the plant rooms, and I spent part on the phone, dropping the chamomile fact to a couple of friendly ears in the food trade. By late afternoon, Saul called back. "Got a nibble," he said. "Chamomile, culinary grade, ordered yesterday morning by a catering outfit in Midtown, bright leaf. Guess who manages accounts for them on the side?" "Don't tell me Voss," I said. "Not Voss." "Prin. That one surprised me." "You think she's moonlighting as a baker?" "I think she might be arranging supplies for someone," Saul said. "Maybe a client, maybe a friend." When I relayed it, Wolfe frowned. "Ms. Prin is a strategist. If she is supplying ingredients, it is not to bake herself. It is to enable someone she wishes to influence." "Meaning she's not just a bystander," I said. "Meaning," Wolfe said, "that she is positioning herself. Perhaps against Voss, perhaps against Miss Harrow. We will speak to her." He didn't mean me alone, and I knew it. The next morning, Prin came into the office with the briskness of someone who expected to win a point. Wolfe wasted no time. "You procured chamomile for Bright Leaf Catering yesterday," he said. She didn't even flinch. "Yes, they asked me to." "For what purpose?" "They didn't say," she replied. "And I didn't ask. They're a client of mine in another matter." "And the biscuit delivered to Miss Harrow last night?" Wolfe asked. "I know nothing about it," she said. "But if you're suggesting someone at Bright Leaf baked it, I'd be interested in knowing as much as you." Her voice was steady, but her eyes moved. Not to me, not to the desk, but toward the photograph still lying there of the glazed biscuit. That flicker was enough for Wolfe. "You are playing a dangerous game, Ms. Prin," he said quietly. "Whether you are a pawn or a knight, the board will claim you if you stand in the wrong square." She smiled thinly. "Mr. Wolfe, I always choose my squares." When she left, Wolfe sat back. "She is signaling, to whom I am not yet certain. But she knows who sent that biscuit. And you think she'll tell?" "She will," Wolfe said, "when it benefits her more than keeping it." Until then, we wait. The biscuit, Archie, was not the end. It was an opening move in a new game. Prynne's exit left the room with the particular stillness it gets when someone has lined up their ducks and expects them to waddle on command. Wolfe watched the closed door for a moment like it might open itself out of embarrassment, then tugged his chair closer to the desk. Not a large motion, but in Wolfe's world, moving the furniture means the idea has graduated. "Bright Leaf," he said, "is not a kitchen. It's a conduit. Ms. Prynne is feeding ingredients into a pipeline to prove a point, and the unglazed biscuit was labeled. See what I can do without you." "Which way is the point aimed?" I asked. "At Voss or at Celia?" "Both," he said. "She is positioning herself as indispensable to whoever keeps their footing after tomorrow. If Mr. Voss stumbles, she steps into the space he leaves. If Miss Harrow doubts her allies, Ms. Prynne offers certainty. In court, if not in the kitchen." I made the face I make when certainty needs handcuffs. "I'll go look at Bright Leaf with eyes instead of invoices." Wolfe nodded. "Take Saul. This is not a room where you should be alone if someone decides to move flour with elbows." Bright Leaf sat over a midtown loading bay that had seen more gossip than sunlight. Inside, the reception was a mood board for weddings. Pastel photos, tall cakes, women laughing at something off camera. The manager, a brisk woman in her 40s named Lydia Cross, had the smile of someone who could hide a body in a sugar sculpture and make the mother of the groom thank her for it. "Ms. Cross," I said, "I'm Archie Goodwin, and this is Mr. Panzer. We're calling about yesterday's order of culinary chamomile." Her eyes ticked the way eyes do when they go to check a shelf in memory. "You're not from the health department," she said. "God forbid," I said. "We like food. We also like accurate ledgers." She considered that and shrugged. It was a small order, paid through Council's trust. We add chamomile to syrups sometimes for tea services. It's not illegal. "Who's Council?" Saul asked. "Henrietta Prynne," she said, no hesitation. "She manages some of our vendor relationships for events where discretion is the main ingredient." "Yesterday's chamomile. What was it used for?" I asked. "Test bakes," she said. "A client requested a neutral biscuit, clean flavor, no glaze. We produced a dozen. They were collected by a bike messenger. No return requested. The client reference was estate, nothing more." "Estate means memorial," Saul said. "Sometimes," she said. "Sometimes it means don't write the name. We don't ask." "You do when you need to," I said. "What cutter did you use?" "Crown," she said. "Client supplied it. Unusual pattern. Ours is different." "Client supplied," I repeated, and let that sit. "And who walked it in?" "Prynne?" "No," she said. "A gentleman from a wholesaler, Jade Table, dropped off a box of tools, cutters, sample tins, parchment rounds. He signed JT and left. We keep a copy of the sign-ins if you're into autographs." We were. The sign-in showed date, time, a block print JT, and a phone number with a Queen's Exchange. Saul leaned on the counter while I called it. A voice with a cigarette coat picked up and told me that Jade Table was a small distributor that helped caterers who didn't want to deal with corporate. When I asked who owned Jade Table, the voice turned to mist. I left my card and a promise to be less polite in person. "Menu note," Saul said to Lydia. "Did Ms. Prynne request the unglazed specifically?" "She did," Lydia said. She said the glaze obscures the message. She realized she'd said more than she meant to and added, "Which makes sense if you're evaluating crumb structure." "Sure," I said, "if your crumb writes letters." Back on the sidewalk, Saul ran the phone number through his version of a rosary. "Jade Table LLC," he said 5 minutes later, "registered to a mail drop in Long Island City. The manager of record is one Alan Voss. Spelled the same as Damon, but different first name." "Brother, cousin alias," I said. "Could be a coincidence," Saul said. and didn't manage to sound like he believed it. I gave Wolfe the jade table of it and Lydia's glaze-free sermon. He listened with his eyes nearly closed, a sign the picture in his head had gone from pencil to ink. "Miss Prynne," he said, "is too careful to be sloppy. She intended the chamomile to be noticed. She intended the cutter to be recognized. She intended Brightleaf to be a mouthpiece that could speak in two directions. Meaning she wanted Celia to see it and Voss to fear it," I said. "Or Avery." "Precisely," Wolfe said. "She is creating a value proposition for herself. I can weaponize your assets, or I can defend them. Choose me either way. Distasteful, but effective." "And the new name," I said. "Alan Voss." Wolfe half nodded. "It will be kin. Mr. Voss is too tidy to attach his own name. He will have used a brother or cousin to launder procurement leaks through Jade Table." "Chamomile aside," I said, "we still have the trespass in our kitchen. Dent or Keene or someone else took a pinch of mastic like a souvenir and flicked flour on the dial. If Voss's security tail belongs to a subcontractor, they may have walked our back alley while Fritz was shopping." "That will end," Wolfe said flatly. "Fritz's morning routine will adjust for now, and you will ask Mr. Durkin to rearrange the tail's day." "Fred will be delighted," I said. "He likes rearranging." By mid-afternoon, Fred called to report the sedan's driver spent his lunch in a diner with a man who had a procurement badge for Harrow and daughter. The name on the badge was not Voss. It was a lieutenant, Harold Binks. Binks paid the check and left with a manila envelope that Fred described as thicker than a sandwich. Wolfe's mouth slanted. "Mr. Voss employs distance. He will let Binks carry the stains." "Find Binks." I found Binks by calling the number on a fake identity card I shouldn't have had and asking for him as if he owed me money. Guilt answered faster. We met in a coffee shop where Binks tried to fill the air with denial while his eyes begged me to tell him what he'd done. I slid a copy of Jade Table's registration across the table and said, "Your boss is family with the boys who sell flour out the back. Don't worry, I won't ask you to confirm. I'll ask your face." His face confirmed. He licked his lips and said, "I don't know anything about flour." "Of course not," I said gently. "Only about cutters, and who signs for them." He swallowed. "Sometimes shipments go missing. We cover the discrepancy with sample write-offs. It's not a felony." "It is if the sample lands in a competitor's kitchen," I said, "or at Brightleaf." Binks sagged. "Am I under arrest?" "You're under an opportunity," I said. "Tomorrow, when Ms. Prynne announces an audit, you will be the man who discovered irregularities and reported them. You will be a hero who resigns to spend time with his dignity." "I don't have dignity," he said miserably. "Borrow some," I said. "It's cheaper than counsel." Wolfe enjoyed that. He enjoys most things that involve cheap counsel. He had Fritz bring beer and actually drank it while I laid out Binks's moist nervousness and Fred's diner opera. Then he put the glass down and leaned forward. "Tomorrow morning," he said, "Miss Harrow will convene an executive session. She will have cause, she will have paperwork, and she will have me at her elbow, not in the room, but contiguous. You, Archie, will be in the lobby, where men go when they lose their courage. Catch what falls." "What do we want to fall?" I asked. "A name," he said. "Not Dent. We have Dent. A name for Jade Table's true owner, if it is not a brother. A name for the man who authorized the procurement mask. And a name for whoever had the effrontery to open my kitchen safe. That last one may be the same as the second, but I doubt it. The kitchen intruder had a cook's curiosity, not an accountant's." "Keene," I said. "Possibly." Wolfe, aloud. "But she keeps her fingerprints on delivery, not on trespass. Mr. Avery's staff have been in this house only under notice. Mr. Garris is a magician with machines, not with locks. Mr. Dent has hands that know heat. He would not risk breaking a house for a pinch of resin, unless he wanted to tell us he had been here." He told us with a cutter, not a pry bar. "You're circling Lima," I said. I hadn't wanted to say it, because Lima's pride had read honest to me. But pride and honesty aren't roommates. "I'm circling the possibility," Wolfe said. "Mr. Lima is jealous of his palate. A chef who believes his work is an altar may commit sacrilege to defend it. He noticed the mastic thread without touching the biscuit. That could be craft. It could also be recognition. I thought of Lima's careful hands lifting trays, of the way he'd watched the glaze in our kitchen under the cloche, as if it had a pulse. "If he came in," I said, "he came through our door. Fritz would have recognized him." "Not if he wore the right coat and hat," Wolfe said. "Fritz sees intruders by behavior. A man who walks like he belongs will pass him once, not twice." "And why would Lima tap the edge of our biscuit?" I asked. "That looked like Dent's signature, not his." "To insult Dent," Wolfe said. "Or to invite him, or to signal to us. Look at the edge, not the glaze. I don't yet know which melody he hums." The phone rang. "Saul, Jade Table's owner," he said, satisfied. "Alan Voss exists, Damon's cousin. He formed Jade Table a year ago. The mail drop pays rent out of an account seeded by a loan from, guess who, Finch Avery's club, under a kitchen renovation line. Avery's money, Voss's cousin, Prin's vendor management. It's a small city." "It's one room," I said, "and everyone's breathing the same air." When I hung up, Wolfe pushed his chair back the width of a sigh. "Good. The circle tightens. Tomorrow, Ms. Prin will move to cut Mr. Voss loose while keeping his cousin as leverage. Mr. Avery will attempt neutrality. Mr. Lima will either detach or declare. We will present Miss Harrow with her options." He rang for Fritz. "No glaze tonight," he said, "and no biscuits." "Bless you," Fritz said. "I'm tired of men trying to decide how sweet our house should be." Morning put me in the lobby of Harrow and Daughter with a newspaper I didn't read. Upstairs, the executive session started at 9 with faces that had been shaved too closely and words that had been rehearsed. Prin went in with a folio like a surgical kit. Voss went in with nothing and came out 90 minutes later with the look of a man who had just discovered the difference between being necessary and being tolerated. He saw me. He didn't stop. He didn't have to. The envelope in his hand had the shape of a severance agreement. Even a blind man could have seen it. Behind him, Lima came, out slowly, as if the floor needed checking. He saw me and gave the smallest nod, the kind a man gives when he's decided which altar he belongs to. I stood and joined him at the elevator bank. "Coffee?" I said. "Tea," he said. "No biscuits." We took a quiet corner in a cafe 2 doors down. He stirred once and then set the spoon down like he was finished touching things for the day. "I did not touch your safe," he said before I could ask. "But I knew what was in it." "How?" I said. "I know how kitchens keep their secrets," he said. "The smell of mastic travels if you're not careful. Whoever took the pinch didn't clean the air. I smelled it under your door." "And the tap on the biscuit's edge?" He met my eyes, steady. "Not mine." "Dent's," I said. "Yes," he said. "He wants you to see him. He wanted me to see him too." "Why you?" "Because he believes I'm the only one who will know what he is capable of," Lima said softly. "He is wrong. Miss Harrow knows. She always knew." He finished the tea and stood. "You will have your reveal," he said. "But you should know this. Sometimes a man copies your work not to steal it, but to show you where you are weak." "Does that change your testimony?" I asked. "It changes my recipe," he said, and left. I carried that back to Wolfe, who heard it like a chord struck in a familiar key. He didn't smile. He rarely does when men announce they're going to be better tomorrow. He pushed the phone toward me. "Call them," he said. "All of them. Here. Tonight. You want an encore?" "I want closure," he said. "We have the board's decisions and the skeleton of their dealings. Now we will put flesh on it. Mr. Voss will learn what it is to be addressed in the past tense. Ms. Prynne will be told the limits of her flexibility. Mr. Avery will be assigned his shame. Mr. Dent will have his pride placed where it belongs. And Miss Harrow will be given her kitchen back. He looked at the cloche, which was empty for once, and then at me. "Before dinner," he said mildly, "I would like my house to stop smelling of mastic." Now, generate the final section of the story, ensuring a satisfying resolution. Maintain the logical progression of clues and character arcs, delivering the final reveal smoothly while keeping the ending impactful and true to the detective style. They came back to the brownstone that night as if the place itself had summoned them, which, in a way, it had. Miss Harrow first, calm in a pale grey that made her look untouchable. Voss came in without his tie, the set of his jaw telling me the boardroom had not been a friendly table. Prynne followed, folio under her arm like a sword. Avery drifted in smelling faintly of his own supper club's bar, and Dent entered behind him, cutter calloused fingers in his pockets. Lima arrived late, eyes sharp, as if the air in here was worth inspecting. Keene came with a faint scent of almond oil clinging to her sleeves. Gerras slouched in last, a man who knew he was here because Wolfe had decided it. Wolfe didn't greet them, just sat at his desk with the composure of a man watching pieces slide into place. Fritz had arranged the chairs in a semicircle. I took my post by the globe. "You are here," Wolfe began, "because a theft was attempted without taking anything, and a threat was made without stating it plainly. That is vulgar. It disturbs my house. It disturbs my clients. It is also, fortunately, obvious." Voss shifted in his chair. Wolfe's eyes landed on him. "You, Mr. Voss, wanted to influence the licensing vote without being seen to. You employed your cousin's shell company, Jade Table, to move flour and tools out of Harrow's control. You engaged Mr. Avery's rooms for your theater, and Ms. Keene to deliver the message. Mr. Dent was your instrument. His skill and his lineage lent the counterfeit credibility." "That's—" Voss started. But Wolfe's hand lifted and the protest died. "Mr. Gerras," Wolfe said, "you were paid to obscure the record. Whether you knew why is immaterial. Ms. Prynne, you are clever. You sought to benefit no matter who won. By feeding chamomile and bright leaf into the mix, you could point to your usefulness to either side. That is not illegality. It is opportunism." Prynne's expression didn't change, but her grip on the folio tightened. "And Mr. Lima," Wolfe went on, "you were not a participant, but you understood the demonstration was for you as much as for Miss Harrow. To show you that your work could be duplicated. You will respond by altering your recipe. That is sensible." Lima inclined his head once. "Miss Harrow," Wolfe said, turning his gaze to her at last, "you have seen their strengths and their weaknesses. Mr. Voss will not recover his standing. Miss Prynne will offer you her loyalty, but she has shown she will bargain with anyone. Mr. Avery will retreat to the safety of his supper club, and Mr. Dent will continue to bake, but without your name to lean on." Dent's mouth twisted. Not quite defiance, not quite shame. "You will decide whether to pursue formal charges," Wolfe said, "but I suspect you will not. The damage you can do to them quietly will last longer." Miss Harrow's voice was cool. "I have no appetite for courtrooms, but I do keep long ledgers." "Good," Wolfe said. "Then we are finished." They filed out, some slower than others. Prynne paused by the door, but Wolfe didn't look up. Voss didn't meet my eyes. Dent gave me the faintest nod, which might have meant thanks or nothing at all. When the door shut for the last time, Wolfe leaned back and let the silence reclaim the room. "That," he said, "was not difficult." "Easy for you to say," I told him. "I had to wade through chamomile, mastic, and family trees." "You enjoyed it," he said. Fritz came in with the tray. Beer for Wolfe, coffee for me. The kitchen safe was locked. The spice jar was untouched. Wolfe lifted his glass. "To biscuits," he said. "Sweet ones?" I asked. His mouth curved the barest amount. "Sweet enough," he said and drank. 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 He said